Well, a huge thank you to everybody for joining us today. Friday, the weeks go quickly. And a huge thank you to our Secretary of Commerce, Kelly Schultz, and to Baltimore Development Corporation President and CEO Colin Tarbert for joining us today too. I'm Brooke Lehrman. I'm a state delegate representing District 46 along with my teammate Senator Bill Ferguson and delegates Luke Clippinger and Robin Lewis. The 46th district, of course, is in Baltimore City, but we are working, we work at the state level as well to pass, implement policies that affect the entire state. But I will say, we've had a really hyper-local focus, or at least that, in the past couple of weeks, really trying to work with our residents and businesses. And one of the reasons, one of the things that I've been doing is hosting these webinars to help keep my constituents and businesses and anybody who wants to listen up to date on the rapidly changing response to COVID. Today, for my 6th briefing, I am joined by 2 really important leaders that help keep Maryland open for business. President and CEO Colin Tarbert and Commerce Secretary Kelly Schultz. So I'm thrilled to have them here today to share their knowledge on the best programs and resources to support your business through the COVID-19 crisis. Before we begin, just a couple points about where we are today and why I'm hosting these webinars. I think it's incredibly important that we do more than just pass legislation in Annapolis, but also make sure that we're connecting people and constituents to the resources that they need. I believe that government is about reducing barriers to success and creating opportunity and keeping our residents safe. And these webinars are a big part of that. Today, we have nearly 9,000 confirmed cases in Maryland, over 400 dead, or nearly 400 dead, and thousands in hospitals. So Governor Hogan has issued a stay-at-home directive, of course. He's closed non-essential businesses, and importantly, tomorrow, we are starting at 7 a.m. People are to wear masks, and 9 and older to wear masks in businesses and retail establishments. So without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to our speakers. We're going to start with Secretary of Commerce Kelly Schultz. She brings a wealth of knowledge to the Department of Commerce from her years of experience working in government, in the private sector, and as a small business owner herself. She's previously served as the Secretary of the Maryland Department of Labor, which is also very busy these days, unfortunately. And we are really thrilled to have her here today. Secretary Schultz, I'll turn it over to you to talk for a little while, and then we'll do some questions. And then after that, we'll speak with Colin, because I know you have to jump off at 1 o'clock. So thank you for joining us.
I do, Delegate, and first of all, thank you for accommodating. It seems like an ever-changing schedule. I think we all feel that way right now. There's so many important and critical things to take care of, but I am really pleased that you invited the Department of Commerce and myself to participate in this call, because it's a really great way to communicate with all of our constituents in the various communities in which we serve. So I've been doing, I think this is my 56th or 57th, something like this in the last couple of weeks.
Nice.
So
I'm glad we made the list. Thank you.
Yeah, and plenty more to come. So I'm thrilled with the communications that we're able to have. So thank you. Just giving everybody an update on where we are. And, I know that for many businesses during this crisis, help cannot come fast enough. And we know that. We've received thousands of applications for the COVID-19 emergency grant and loan programs at the department. They were originally introduced, the applications were open on March 23rd. And unfortunately, on April 6th, we shut down that application process just due to the volumes. I know many businesses are eager for news about their applications, so I just want to provide a few updates as to where we are. If your constituents were to check their application status, and it says in review, that may mean it is being reviewed, and it may mean that it is still in the queue. So our review team may not have gotten to it yet. So that in review status is the very beginning status. So some of them are in review and some of them are in the queue. If you want to know why it's taking so long with the almost 40,000 applications, it's just volume. I mean, that's the only thing that I can respond to with that. Within the first few hours of the program going live on March 23rd, we received thousands of applications. Within 48 hours of that application being online, we realized that our existing system just couldn't handle that workload. So we went and we contracted very quickly through our Department of Information Technology with an existing Maryland vendor to help us build a brand new system. And also on March 25th, we put out an emergency call for volunteers from other state agencies so that we could get them to get trained and help us with reviewing the applications. In fact, over the last couple of weeks, we have onboarded more than 150 volunteers from other state agencies. And as a point of reference, our entire department only has about 200 employees. So we've almost doubled the size of the employees right now working on this effort to be able to assist our businesses. On top of that, we implemented some internal checks and controls so that we could make sure that we protect the taxpayers' funds as we work through this crisis as well. So we were balancing a lot of different workflows and processes. Understandably, everybody wants to know when they'll find out if their application has been accepted. That is the most common question that I receive every day. And unfortunately, my answer is I just don't know right now. It's very difficult to track all of these, and every single day our process and our workflow gets stronger and stronger, and more applications are getting through the process, and people are getting checks in their hands. So as with everybody else through this crisis, I'm just simply asking for patience, and we're working towards some very immediate solutions for those folks. I also wanted to say, I've already mentioned, the number of outreaches that we've had through the Department of Commerce, making sure from the very beginning that people across the state knew that this opportunity existed. And now it's that communication as to how we can continue to help them. One thing that has been very difficult at the Department of Commerce is our mission has always been, and it will always continue to be, to attract businesses to the state and help businesses grow and prosper. Unfortunately, at this period of time, the Department of Commerce is more in a trying to just sustain the businesses that we have, but we're still dedicated to that, right? And so we have an entire team of individuals, over 350 now, that are dedicated to make sure that we can sustain the businesses that we have. So people need to understand that they can still reach out to us if they have questions and concerns. We are here to be able to support those businesses in any way that we can. The other unfortunate news this week was that the SBA programs, the PPP program and the EIDL program, those applications were, they were taken down, I believe, for now. Hopefully, if our Maryland delegation is successful, they will be working on getting an extension of some of those programs and additional funds to go through them. I know Governor Hogan is working very closely with the federal delegation to make sure that they understand that our businesses need this type of support as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's one other, and we need it, right? And we do know that there is some money now coming into the state, and there's going to be some money going into the counties and the local jurisdictions. So the Department of Budget and Management has asked some of those jurisdictions that if you start receiving some of those federal funds, and if they plan on doing some type of a small business relief program, to kind of check in with the Department of Commerce, because we obviously have some lessons learned, and we have a system that's able to be up and running because it's there with applications that could use additional funding for that. And we don't have that idea right now with the state funds that we're receiving, how those are going to be distributed. A lot of that depends on the costs for the health costs that have been ongoing and the planning for that emergency management. So that's ongoing, what we have there. Okay. I do have a little bit of good news.
Sure.
With our, everyone likes good news. Our manufacturing incentive program, that was the program that we stood up at the same time. Well, we announced it at the same time, and an application came out about a week later, which was a $5 million emergency relief manufacturing fund, which was to incentivize our state manufacturers to produce PPE, like face masks, as well as ventilators and others. And that is grants up to $100,000 to manufacturers so that they can maybe look at changing their systems a little bit, producing more of a particular product that they're already producing, or changing their lines if they have to buy new equipment or something of that event, so that they can produce something which is on our critical needs list that's been developed by the Emergency Management Agency and our health department. And then those procurements are working through the Department of General Services. But we have just this week approved 3 contracts for them to receive grants. And so we have currently about $830,000 worth of grants for all of our local manufacturers to start producing those. And I know that the governor is going to want to talk about that. One of them is, which has already been announced, is Nation's Photo Lab. And they had already been approved to do White House task force and producing additional non-surgical face shields. And so they are a recipient of one of our grants as well. So we're really excited about that. And I think what this draws to, it draws to the realization that our Maryland businesses are resilient. They're also innovative. And I think we're really good at that in the state of Maryland. We should be really, really proud of what we can do there.
Thank you.
I guess my only other update, and then I'll go to questions real fast,
Sure.
is we are, my teams who are looking at different ways in order to be able to come up with ideas on how to do some type of possible phased-in approach to reopening. There are several different types of work groups that are being formed in different industries, so that those industry partners can personally tell us what their barriers are to any type of a reopen schedule. And we want to be able to work with them so that they can come up with solutions on what it looks like to have their doors open on the first day, and providing those recommendations to the governor and the governor's advisory council so that they can have an idea of what the industries are working on. So that is probably as much as we're working on the grants and those loan applications that are still pending. I would say that this is the other half of my day, is being able to look to see what does it mean when we come out of this, because we are going to eventually come out of this in the near future, and we want to make sure that our businesses are ready in order to be able to do that.
Okay. Yeah. Well, thank you for that. Thanks for joining us. Could you talk a little bit about, let's see, there are a few questions that were submitted. One was about the importance of the Main Streets program, and using this emergency to recognize the importance of small businesses to the communities they serve. I'm not sure, Con certainly can later talk about Main Streets, but I know also there's funding for Main Streets at the state level. And just if your view or your thoughts on the importance or on funding for Main Streets, given how difficult reopening will be and their centrality to sort of bringing people to our downtown and Main Street areas. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I do actually. I think people know that the Department of Housing and Community Development actually oversees those programs. But when we look at the types of businesses that we have in the state, those very small Main Street type businesses are a very large percentage of our employers and the number of small businesses that we have in the state. So I would say critical to what we're doing. And when we put our grants and our loans together, we identified eligibility based on employees of 50 or less. And I'll say a large percentage of the, particularly the grants that are coming in, are for just 2 or 3 to 5 people that that are employed with those businesses. So obviously, that's probably where the biggest need is in those businesses that that probably don't have as much capital to work with in reserve.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. Thanks for that. There was also a question about, what is being offered for small businesses who don't have employees. I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about that, if any And if you also, obviously we hope, and I hope, and I know Governor Hogan hopes, that the next federal bill has funding for states in it, and not just funding, certainly funding to help us deal with this crisis, but also funding for revenue, general revenue as well. So curious to, hear your thoughts on the state, if the state gets more money from the federal government, whether some of that will go to some of, to reopen the business program, to work with small businesses, and your thoughts on what are being offered for small businesses who don't have employees right now.
Sure. So as far as the additional funds that'll be coming in, we're hopeful. We don't have any guarantees that some of that money will come back into our program. The reason why we kept the application process open as long as we did, understanding that there would most likely be a shortfall, was because of the hope of federal funds coming in and not wanting to have our business owners having to go through an application process more than once. So we have everything in the pipeline ready to go. And so if we do get something of that capacity, then we can just continue on through the process where we left off. So that's really important for us, and I think important for the business community. And originally, when we determined our eligibility, we worked with our internal economists and our research teams, and what we knew was coming very, very quickly was going to be this avalanche of unemployment applications. And so our initial goal was to be able to assist those companies that had employees so that we could keep those employees off of the unemployment insurance. So that's the initial goal, to try to take some of them out of that system and keep them working so that the business can stay open and the employees have somewhere to go, and so assisting the most number of employees through the process. Since then, the Pandemic Unemployment Act was passed, and those that are independent contractors or self-employed have the ability to apply for unemployment insurance. And I know that there is very, very fast action from both the federal government and from the state of Maryland to get that process for that application up immediately. So I think that they're very close to coming up with that solution so that those individuals can also benefit from not only the traditional unemployment insurance, but the additional $600 a week that was passed through Congress with the CARES Act.
Right, yeah, thank you. I see somebody in the chat asked about when self-employed individuals will be able to apply for unemployment, and the word that we've heard from the Department of Labor is just to, there's a place where you can submit your name and email information, and they will get back to you as soon as that application is open, because they've had to create a new sort of whole new computing system to handle that. But my hope is certainly that, we're thinking next week and not next month. So hopefully very soon. And
I think it will be very soon.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that'd be good. We have a lot of those in the city, so, and everywhere, of course. But so you did mention, it looks like as it looks like there are too many requests to fulfill, how will the Department of Commerce decide which businesses receive the COVID relief grant? And will the amounts be more than the original $10,000 limit?
So the amounts will not change. So they will stay right now with the program with the $10,000, up to $10,000 grant and up to $50,000 for the loan. And it has been from the very beginning. We had to do this process as a first in, first out type of a scenario. We did not put restrictions on what types of industries. We did not put preference on what types of industries. So we're going through the applications as they are received in our queue.
Great, that's helpful to know. That obviously there are many questions about when when businesses will start to be notified. Could you talk a little bit about how many businesses have been notified that they're receiving a grant, or where you are in that process and how long you're seeing it take, or what your thoughts are on that?
You know what? I hate to give the I don't know answer right now
Yeah.
because I'm not really sitting in front of my computer and I don't have that, so I would hate to misquote.
Yep. Yep.
But what I can say is that there are a significant number that have gone through the review process. Some are trying to be resolved through a complete department of individuals trying to help those applicants that may have put in the wrong information, and we're seeing a lot of that. So that takes a little bit of time to get through there. And then also the actual drafting of a very brief grant document in order for individuals to sign. So we're going through some of that process right now that people should start, because of the onboarding of the additional staff and having those beefed up a little bit, they should start hearing sooner rather than later.
Got it. Okay. That's helpful. And I know you have to run in a couple minutes. Are there any sort of closing remarks or further thoughts that you'd like to share, or advocacy steps or other things that you'd like to share with the business owners on the call?
I want to tell you kind of a happy story that I had this week. And I don't know for some of the folks on the phone who is a big giant fan of It's a Wonderful Life, but I had a wonderful It's a Wonderful Life experience this week. I woke up one morning a few days ago with, for some reason, George Bailey on my mind, and thinking about the run on Bailey Building and Loan. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, I'm sorry, but I'm just a rambling person at this point in time. And I started thinking about that, and you know how stressful and anxious George and his uncle and everybody else were, and everybody wanted to pull out all of their funds because it was a drastic moment because of the fear and the anxiety. And then at that moment where one of the residents, one of the customers said, George, I don't need my $300. I only need the $15 just to get me through this week, or whatever the amounts were. And George's demeanor like immediately changed, and he said, that's great. And then the demeanor of everybody around them just kind of changed. And I thought it was just a very interesting way that I started looking at what we are going through here in the state of Maryland and actually in the nation. And then I told my team this story, and I'm like, gosh, wouldn't that be great if we just had one of those moments where somebody came and said, you know, I only need what I need. And about 2 hours later, I got an email from our email response team, and they forwarded it to me, who wasn't on my earlier call, and said, hey, Secretary, I thought you might want to see this. And it was from a business owner who owned a hair salon. And she wrote to our team and said, I just received word that I qualified for one of your grants. And I also received word that I'm qualified for the PPP program through SBA. I do have an outstanding loan application in with the Department of Commerce, and I just wanted you to take it out of the review process because somebody else probably needs that more than I do right now. And that was the moment.
Yeah.
Where I said, you know what, I think we're all going to get through this. It's still going to be some bumpy roads, but in the end, we're all a part of the same community, and in the end, we all understand what our neighbors need and what our colleagues need, and you know what our friends and family need. And so I just wanted to leave you with that, delegate, because maybe if we look at those types of giving and caring individuals in the future, it'll make the rest of us get through it as well.
Understood. And I certainly hope that, you know, landlords and banks and I feel that way. Yeah, no, I know this is really difficult, and appreciate the work that you're doing and your team is doing, and appreciate their responses. And thank you for joining us today. And we'll certainly keep in touch, and we'll keep pushing information that you have out to folks in the hopes that we can, you know, save, you know, our small business sector. So thank you.
Thank you, Delegate, very much. Have a great day and be safe.
You too. Now I'm so pleased to have Colin Tarbert on the line, and we're going to he's going to walk us through some slides and discussion of what BDC is doing to respond to the COVID-19 pandemic. Thank you, Colin, for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Delegate. Hopefully you can hear me.
Yep.
And just for some of those of you who are on online who aren't familiar with BDC, just a quick summary of who we are and what we do. So Baltimore Development Corporation is essentially the city's economic development agency. And so our goal is to promote inclusive economic growth through job creation and investment, which hopefully leads to careers for city residents. And so that's our mission. And of course, for the past month or over a month now, we've been focused on the COVID-19 response and hopefully soon the recovery and reopening of our business community. So if you can, I don't know if am I controlling the slides or are you? Thanks. You're muted.
Yep, I got it.
No worries.
I got it. So just tell me, just say next slide and I'll move us through. Thank you.
All right, very good. Yeah, so we've been describing our response in a sort of a 4-point plan that you see here on your screen, which is outreach, information, collaboration, and action. And so these components are not linear; they're all happening at the same time. But these really kind of form our response. And I'll say, and I think the secretary probably feels a similar vein. Given the scope and scale of the pandemic and the impact it's had on the business community and obviously everyone, but in particular from our role in the business community, the scope is so beyond what we can really help in terms of fiscal help at the local level. And so to a certain extent, it's been really kind of stressful and frustrating for our team, who's used to being able to come up with more solutions and help people solve problems where, you know, we felt even internally like, okay, what can we do and how can we do it?
Right.
And so this is what we've been doing, and obviously we continue to come up with solutions as we can. But we can get to the next slide. In terms of outreach, very early on, I think it was the first day where the shutdowns began, we launched a business impact survey. And the delegate knows it's now available also in Spanish and Korean. We got it translated and it's available. And so we've really used this as a tool in real time to gather what was happening on the ground and also be able to connect with the business community. So to date, we've had about 700 responses. What we did is for every respondent, we assigned that to a team member who then followed up with a phone call or an email and got more information about what was happening for that business and how we might be able to direct them to the right resource. So we've gotten to almost 500 of the businesses. And then in addition, we have another 100 that we had already been working with, you know, our small business clientele. So we've touched close to 600 businesses, and our team that's working on this is probably about 10 people. So it's a lot of case management to keep up with, but we're doing the best that we can. And in doing that, we've also been very thoughtful to make sure that our outreach is being done in an equitable way. So we're pretty happy with the breakdown. So 40% of the businesses that we've been able to connect with are minority-owned businesses, which is a higher percentage than the overall city percentage. So that's been good. That was a concern of mine in particular when we were doing outreach, especially doing it, you know, through survey tools and over the web. We were afraid we were going to miss some businesses. And then 50% are women-owned businesses, which is about the breakdown for the city. So we think our coverage in terms of percentages is good. Obviously, there's 12,000 small businesses in the city, so we're only reaching a relatively small percentage of them. But hopefully, other businesses are able to access the resources online.
And are you still? I mean, is it still important for businesses to fill out that survey? Are you still collecting information, or have you sort of moved past that?
We're still collecting, so they can use the impact survey. And actually, literally, like today, we haven't officially launched it, but it's live now. If you go to the website, which I'll talk about later, www.baltimoretogether.com, which is in the slides, there's a contact. And that we've now built out a much more sophisticated contact form. And I'll talk a little bit about that, how we're going to use that form to be able to get people even more assistance.
Great.
To the next slide. I think you skipped. There you go. And then just real quickly, this is an internal mapping tool that we're using, but just to kind of keep ourselves informed, we're mapping all of the different respondents, so you can see the close to 700 there and where they
Yep.
fall.
Hmm.
And we're looking to see the orange areas that people can see are the commercially zoned areas. And so we're
Okay.
looking to see if some of those areas where there's not dots, why are there not dots, and how do we actually do outreach to them, which I'll talk about a little bit. But we're trying to be as data driven and analytical as possible throughout this process. Next slide. Great. So the second component that I talked about was information. And so this is the website that we launched, again, kind of the first week of the major impact. And we've been updating it literally on a daily basis. It's live now. You can go to it and find the most recent information available. And there's also that contact link. And if you go to that contact link, there's now a pretty sophisticated input portal, and we're going to be partnering with a series of other technical advisory groups focused primarily on the smallest businesses. So, businesses that have, 0 to, 10 employees who need the assistance and haven't, might not have a banking relationship, etc. Those are the ones that we want to make sure we get to. And so there's a philanthropic funders group that's focused on small business that actually launched last year. And so they're funding 7 different technical advisory organizations. BDC is going to be the funnel through the Baltimore Together website to help match small businesses with a technical assistance provider. And actually, if you go to the contact list, it'll ask you, do you have a relationship with, and then there's a list of different existing providers. So to use an example for the 46th district, Latino Economic Development Corporation is one of those TA providers. And so if you already have a relationship with them, you'll click that. That'll tell BDC, hey, let's connect them to LEDC so they can get that help. So that's going to help us at BDC really kind of maximize our resources as well. So
Yeah.
And that's launching, and we hope to have that in place. It's basically being put in place now. With, as the secretary said, we're all very hopeful that the federal government's going to issue more funds for PPP and for the EIDL program. And so we want to be prepared in advance for that next wave of funding, that the smallest businesses that have had trouble accessing these programs have a partner to get their applications in.
Great, thank you.
Go to the next one. And so I touched on this. So this is the third component, which is collaboration, which I think is going to be even more important as we go into recovery mode. I mentioned the third bullet, which is this kind of collaborative network that will be helping to coordinate. But I also wanted to talk a little bit about the second bullet, which was announced earlier this week, although it seems like it was a month ago.
It really does. It feels like a long time ago.
I think it was Tuesday.
Yeah, which is crazy.
We have been working with Lendistry, which is an online platform that's been focused on Baltimore actually for a little bit now, and was planning to make a launch into the market. They've now done it because of COVID in particular, but and the Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Businesses program, Goldman Sachs had put $10 million into Lendistry in order to make PPP loans with a specific focus on loans that were $250,000 or less, and also focused on minority businesses and small businesses in the city. And so that program launched on Tuesday. They have lent out about half of that money, a little over the $5 million of the 10. They're still accepting applications online. So if you go to Lendistry's website, you can still fill out your PPP application. But Lendistry is obviously unable to process those because the federal government has shut down its PPP program and its portal. But the thought is, if hopefully over the weekend or early next week, PPP is extended, then Lendistry will just move those applications that are in the queue through the portal to the federal government. So we're still telling people, go ahead, if you haven't applied for PPP through a lender, feel free to use Lendistry. Again, the loans are smaller, so they're geared towards smaller businesses. We can't guarantee that they'll be approved because the federal government hasn't extended the program. But if they do, then you'll already be in the queue. There was a little bit of confusion as to whether Lendistry had run out of money or the federal government. It's the federal government side. We still have some capacity within the Lendistry program for businesses to apply.
Got it. And is there any thought that as the city is determining how to spend the federal aid that it's getting, that some of that money might go in to supplement, to supplement this effort, or some other small business effort?
It's unclear. So in the CARES Act, there's approximately $106 million that will come to Baltimore City. From what I've been able to glean, and these are on conversations with directly with Senator Cardin and Senator Van Hollen and kind of these webinar series, the language is for reimbursable expenses. And so there's sort of a question of, is this an expense, or are they really talking about setting up, field hospitals and more emergency response? And then the other question goes on, revenue loss for jurisdictions, whether that's an expense that's going to be eligible. And based on the last information that I heard, which was, within the last day or two, it's just not clear. So okay. hopefully they'll clarify that in the bill.
Right.
So that I'm guessing. Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, Nick, you want me to move it?
I'll be quick on these. These are just some specific actions that BDC took. So we defer for our clients. We have a loan program, outside of all of this. So we deferred our loans for our customers, which was helpful. You can go to the next slide. Okay. And then similar to what Secretary Schultz talked about, they had a much larger program, obviously at the state level for manufacturing. BDC, through our Made in Baltimore program, which is operated under BDC, we issued a $50,000 grant program for local makers, which has been very successful. So hopefully we can see if we can continue this program. But just a couple pictures. We ended up issuing 9 different grants to local makers. This is a picture of a bottler machine at Mountain Royal Soap. They're making hand sanitizer, and so they were able to purchase this to increase their capacity. You can go to the next slide. And of the 9 grants, 50% were awarded to either minority or women-owned businesses. This is citywide youth development. They're making face masks. I think they're also making full-on gowns. You can go to the next one. And then these are up downtown on the Ike units, if you're familiar with those. Of course, no one's walking around downtown to see them, but it's just kind of promoting what Secretary Schultz said about Maryland companies being resilient. There's certainly some really good news stories locally in the city about our resilience and our ability to, produce PPE and other equipment in time and need. So that's been a pretty, both productive and feel good opportunity for us. Go to the next slide. And then this was a bit of a reach for the stars, but BDC did request from the federal government through the mayor to be a Paycheck Protection Program lender, which probably will not be approved, but we wanted to make sure that we were in a position for any of those businesses that didn't have a lender and kind of got left behind, that we might be able to do something with. So we haven't gotten any response on that yet, but hopefully this technical assistance network that we've set up will help address that need that we had. And so the last slide is, for those of you local businesses who are looking for the most up-to-date information or looking to connect with an actual person to help you through the process, the best way to get in touch with us is now through baltimoretogether.com. And in there's the contact, and you also see links for the survey, and there's a link for the Lendistry program as well, which of course isn't the only lender out there. I know LEDC is also doing small business loans. I'm
Yep.
involved with the Neighborhood Impact Investment Fund. I think we lent them some capital to do that, and then also Maryland Capital Enterprises, MCE. They're actually located in the Eastern Shore, but they do loans here. We also, through NIF, had lent them some capital as well. So there are providers out there that are doing, the small business loans.
Yep.
We're happy to connect you with them and help you through the process.
Great. That's great. Thank you very much. And we do have a few questions. There was a question I asked earlier of the secretary, and there's also a comment in chat too about the Main Street program. I know that it's not part of BDC anymore, but it of course is part of city government. And just the importance of the Main Street programs. It says they're not listed as one of your partners. Could they be included so they know which of their businesses is reaching out to BDC? Seems like it makes sense since that's they're so connected. And then just an emphasis on funding the Main Streets programs. So when when the city is, and our culture is up and open for business again, that the Main Streets programs can be there to help promote all of their businesses that have had to be closed. Does BDC, are you in touch with Verna and the Main Street program? Are you able to include the Main Street program as one of your partners? Any thoughts on Main Streets?
Yeah, so as you said, Main Streets used to be under BDC. It was moved to the mayor's office, so it's under Verna and Paul Taylor's team. We're working constantly with Paul in particular, but obviously, Verna's looped in through Paul. I'm happy to figure out how to work with Amanda on connecting any businesses that we're getting through BDC back to the Main Streets. Logistically, we'd have to think about that. I know in particular in Highlandtown, Louis Cardon is well known. He's been out there also working with some of the Main Street businesses. So we're gonna just have to think about how we connect offline to share that. But yeah, absolutely, we want to use all the partners we have to try to get back back in recovery. And then yeah, in terms of programming for the Main Streets, it used to be a very successful program, and over the years, like BDC, Main Street budget has been cut, unfortunately, and so I think as a community, as a small business community, this probably highlights the need for more support for those programs.
Yeah, agreed. As somebody who has 3 Main Streets in her district, I certainly agree with that. Can you talk a little bit about, there were several questions about how can we make it easier for restaurants to acquire outdoor seating and get rid of some of the red tape, al fresco dining, thoughts on allowing restaurants to continue alcohol, wine, and beer delivery. I think some of the questions relate to, given how bad things are right now, can the city start planning with BDC and the mayor's office to do everything it can to streamline the process, to make it easier for businesses to make money and be open as soon as we are allowed to be open again? So I think that goes to sort of your plans as you start thinking about how we open up as a city again and what the city can be doing now to prepare for opening up in a really strong way that is supportive of businesses. I think some of the restaurants are, of course, very small. And so to the extent that they can have seating outside so that people can sit several feet apart from one another, but restaurants don't lose all of their customers, thinking through things like that. Do you have thoughts on the process for coming up with reopening guidelines, or have those conversations started, and how can businesses be involved in those conversations and providing advice to BDC?
Yeah, so I'd say those conversations are starting, and pre-COVID-19, I would argue for a more streamlined approach to outdoor seating and all the
yes.
So maybe this is an opportunity for all those small businesses online here to take advantage of this opportunity in a crisis mode to kind of streamline and rethink our policy. But to answer your question, yes. And I think this is actually a great opportunity for us to partner with the main streets in particular. But I've had ideas about, should we start taking out parking lanes and turning them into parklets that you've seen on parking day, if you're familiar with that, where they
Yes, we should do that. Yes, we
yeah.
should.
So I'm very much a proponent of that. We're thinking through some of that, and I've reached out to a few partners. I've talked to the mayor's office kind of conceptually about what we can do to make it easier. Can we suspend some of the current regulations and what would have to happen to do that? So I'd say that the conversations are happening. I don't think we have anything tangible yet to share, but it seems like, and I could be wrong because we're all kind of guessing here, but there is the conversation both nationally and state, regionally. Sounds like we're trying to get to this, what I'll call reopening phase.
Yeah.
And so, over the next week or two, it'd be great to have some guidelines for exactly what you were talking about. And so I'm trying to link up with the Bloomberg School of Health, public health in particular, to get some maybe local guidance from them on what they would suggest in terms of these main streets and turning some of our public right-of-way space into space for people to dine in a safe way that people feel comfortable. And
Yeah.
then obviously we'd have to work through the city to sort of implement those concepts. So conversations begun, and hopefully in the next week or two, we'll have some specific concepts.
That's great. I mean, I think, from what the questions I've been hearing and comments as well, it might be worth having the main streets managers be a part of some of those conversations, or doing a conversation with the main street managers to talk about what their businesses would like to see as a way to funnel up to you. So perhaps through Paul or others, that might make sense. Any thoughts on, and I don't know if there are any other questions. I haven't seen any more on the chat, but any thoughts on, next steps, or what you're hearing from the federal government about, where we are and where things are moving next, or anything else you'd like to add?
No, I just hope that the Congress acts quickly on the PPP program, because it's clear that people who haven't been able to apply have been left out. So
Yep.
Hopefully that's the next step, so we can keep going with that, and then look forward to reopening. And then, longer term, there's going to be a longer economic recovery plan that has to be put together. And so we're thinking that way as well, which goes beyond sort of just reopening restaurants, but Baltimore's hospitality and tourism industry is going to change to some sort of new normal, and what that looks like and how that's going to impact jobs here. It's probably going to be quite significant, and that's going to be longer than sort of the next 90 days. I could see that impacting us. What does a conference look like at the convention center, over the next couple of years? And so we're starting to think through those, but obviously we're still in this response mode, and then we'll move into this reopening mode. And then I think it's ultimately a longer term recovery effort.
Yeah. Well, if we're not going to be having too many conventions over the next couple of years, maybe it's a great time to tear it down and build a new one.
So look forward to
but yes, no, and Al Hutchison at Visit Baltimore has great ideas. So, and I know you all work really closely. So thank you. Thank you so much to everybody for joining us today. I always end these with a note of gratitude. Many of us are lucky to be able to have the luxury of working from home. And we're able to do that because of our frontline people who are out there, our nurses, our doctors, our transit workers, our grocery store workers, people who are out on the front lines. So, and a huge thank you to all of you business owners. I know this is an incredibly stressful and difficult time, and I think we all wish that there was more that we could do, but we thank you for being there. You're the backbone and the heart of our communities. We chose to live in Fells Point, my family and I, because we love being surrounded by a vibrant commercial scene. So I want to do everything I can to make sure that you are all able to reopen when we're allowed to. So thank you to all of you. Thank you, Colin, for joining us, and everybody have a great weekend. Take care.